Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Today, we're going to talk about the complex world of assisted living communities. The journey to find a community that is not only safe, but also aligns with the loved one's needs can be overwhelming. Recently, I've had the honor of helping a family with this search, and I met Annemarie Fina at one of the communities. Unfortunately, Annemarie was facing challenges with the care her mother was receiving. I wanted to bring her onto the podcast to give a personal perspective of the realities of searching for an assisted living community for a loved one. Annemarie, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your story with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to today's podcast.
So can you start off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your mom and what led you to the decision of finding her an assisted living community?
It actually started with my father first, because my father suffered from Lewy body dementia, which is the most progressive form of dementia there is. And he was in his 80s. And when he drove through the garage door and called me to fix the garage door, I knew that we had a problem. I knew that my mother was starting to have the beginnings of dementia when my mother called me one morning at about 7:45 in the morning and told me that my father was lying on the floor and that I should come and help him get up. And so I sped over to the house and saw my neighbor and had my neighbor come with me because I was afraid I would need help to lift my dad up off the floor. And when I got there, my mother said that I should help him up. And when I tried to help him up, there was no way I could because my father had been on the floor since 2:00 in the morning. So I called 911. They came and they took him away and took him to the hospital. And I found out that he had broken his hip. And my mother was afraid to call 911 because she thought that she would be charged $100 for the call. And I knew something wasn't right. And it took me a long time to forgive my mother that she didn't call me at 2:00 in the morning when he was on the floor. And she was not physically able to even try to pick him up because she herself suffers from, she was a polio victim and she could barely walk and she uses a walker herself. So there was no way she could help my dad up. Some months later, she had an incident where I took her to a medical clinic, and instead of pushing the button to open the door, for anybody in a wheelchair, I wanted to go to the restroom, and she pulled the fire alarm. And so we've got 1,000 people running out the door, and within seconds and a minute, the fire department is there after 1 to 2 minutes, and there are people, like crowds of people standing outside, and all I want to do is just run away. So after telling someone who worked there, who was sitting at the desk next to me, telling her that my mother pulled the fire alarm on accident and to please tell the fire department it's not a fire, she was having a panic attack. So I just took my mom, ran out, set her near the fire truck and ran and got the car and then loaded her into the car. And then I was out of that parking lot on 2 wheels and never to return. So that is kind of how I realized that my mother wasn't thinking like I think. Yes.
She wasn't living with your father at that time, because was your father in memory care at that point, or?
So my father was in assisted living, and he passed away in November of 2020. He had a stroke and then had difficulty swallowing. So he was in hospice for about 2.5 months. So this was in the heart of COVID. This was a very difficult time to have a loved one in assisted living. Then I knew my mother was needing more and more care after my father passed away. My mother, I couldn't really leave her for long periods of time. And my family is abroad. So my brother and I, we have to take care of our parents. And my brother lives, far away. I mean, it's a day's drive for him to come.
So your first experience was with your father, and then I met you
Yes.
with your mother. Um, and I know your mom has Alzheimer's. What were some of your initial feelings and concerns you had when you were first starting to look for an assisted living facility for your mom, considering her Alzheimer's?
I definitely wanted her to somehow exercise her brain. And some of the assisted living facilities have programs where they work with the brain, different kinds of games or cards, or also little pieces of paper that have questions on them, and they have to answer them. They sometimes will have current events, and they'll talk about. They'll play documentaries about history. They also I toured a facility in Cupertino that had like a box of, it was the wedding box, and they had an old picture of somebody getting married in a wedding dress, and old photos, and so that people can go back to that time and talk about it with other people, for example. And so I wanted my mother to be in a facility that was stimulating. And I felt as if some of the larger facilities have more comprehensive programs to get the brain moving. And they have them also drawing and painting. But I think concerns that I had were that she was getting out of her room, and that she was talking with other people, eating at a table with other people, and also just, it's normal that you go to dinner or you go to meals 3 times a day. And I wanted her to be exercising. So she had physical therapy 3 times a week. And also that she was, because if she moved her body, then she'll move her brain. And with Alzheimer's, that's really, really important. And Alzheimer's patients tend to isolate themselves. And that's exactly what my mother was doing at home. She no longer had friends who she was meeting with anymore. And she would stare at the computer screen. And these facilities also encourage people to use a computer or an iPad. There is something called a grand pad. But I was concerned that my mother was going to leave it somewhere and forget about it. Many Alzheimer's patients will leave their hearing aids or lose them somehow.
So with your mom, and specifically, did she go right into memory care, or did she go into the assisted living portion of the community? Because I know that in some communities they do have a step before going into memory care, that like a friendship kind of step.
So she did not, she went into assisted living, but I felt like in the first facility that she was in, they did not take her to the activities. The escort was just not available. Um, and I didn't understand that. That was one of the reasons I pulled my mother out of that facility, because she was too isolated in that facility. And so I took her to another facility, in the second one. And that one, they had the Circle of Friends, which was it's actually the level before you get to memory care. And in the Circle of Friends, it's kind of like almost like daycare for the elderly, and they have a morning program, they have an afternoon program, and they do all kinds of drawing, painting, coloring, and also talking. They have conversations. The person who does the recreation therapy with them, or who's just in charge of Circle of Friends, asks them questions, thought-provoking questions. And they do current events. Yes. And I found it to be a very useful program for my mother. When they get to memory care, they're not really that social anymore, not as much as they were before. They kind of, the Alzheimer's patients and the dementia patients, they kind of start going into themselves.
Yeah.
And it's just part of the process when the Alzheimer's progresses.
Yeah, the world becomes much smaller. Now, first, I have two questions. How many assisted care facilities has your mom been in? And did all of them have a circle of friends? Is that something that is common in assisted living?
So my mother I just moved her in yesterday into the third facility.
Okay.
And she did remarkably well. And with the move, I thought she would be angry. So I just explained to her that it would be closer to where I am, so that I could ride my bike to the location where she is, and I could see her more often. And that it was just maybe more staff, so she would get more attention, just to calm her and keep her comfortable. And then I didn't talk about it until the day we moved in. Not all of these facilities have a circle of friends. The new one that I moved her to doesn't have a circle of friends, but they promised me that they would escort my mother to all these activities, because I told them that my mother was in the circle of friends and that I want her out of her room as much as possible, so that she can enjoy her life. Yep. She's 89 years old. And I don't know, she could live to be 100. I have no idea, but I want her to be happy. And I can tell you, even though my mother had Alzheimer's in the first facility, she was depressed. And I could really tell she was depressed in the first facility. And it was because she wasn't getting enough stimulation.
Since she's been to three facilities now, how do you go about researching researching the facility, because you've had three different facilities, and what challenges or red flags do you think that other people should be aware of as they do their search?
So if you look at the Department of Social Services website, you click on elderly assisted living, and then you put in the address of the facility that you are interested in placing your parent. And then it will list citations, complaints, and my mother was in the second facility when I discovered that they were on a 3-year probation for someone who had recurring falls, and they had even set up a camera, but the camera wasn't placed in the proper spot. And this person, this elderly person, collapsed and finally broke her hip and was on the floor for a long time, and then had to be hospitalized, obviously. And then it was the Department of Social Services did an investigation. After I found out that they were on probation and they could lose their license, it was very frightening to me that my mom was there. The first facility, we were there for 1.5 years. That was too long, I felt. And this time I didn't want to make the same mistake. And she had been at the second facility for 1 year, exactly 1 year, maybe 13 months. Yeah. To the move. And for one thing, cleanliness and personal hygiene, they were not showering my mother regularly. And I remember going in and talking to the nurse and asking her, how often has my mom been getting a shower? Because the doctor had already ordered twice a week. And then the doctor ordered 3 times a week after my mother they discovered that my mother had a fungus under her left breast. She ended up having this fungus twice. Then she had also fungus in her groin area all the way to her belly button. And this is caused by weeks and maybe even months of not getting a shower. So often in these facilities, they will ask the resident, do you want a shower? No. And I would tell them, don't ask my mother the question. You just tell her, hello, it's time to get a shower today. Oh, and I'm warming up the water, and, wheel her in her shower chair.
You, as a person who's experienced now, what are you asking the community to ensure that your mom's going to get the care that she needs?
So some residents will get up in the middle of the night. So my mother should have help when she is toileting, and that is not happening. So I think if you have a resident or a relative who wanders, for example, I would ask, do you have some kind of a tracking device? They put that on my father, on his leg, I think his leg or his wrist. No, it was a wristband. Now I remember, so that if he would try to leave the facility, then an alarm would go off outside the front door. And so, for example, I think that's important to ask that question. I think also, how often is housekeeping? If you want housekeeping, we paid, I think, over $800 a month to have a second day of housekeeping per week. I would want to know how often and whose responsibility is it to clean her toilet seat and to clean her sink and to just and next to her bed, for example, too. There could be, she might not make it to the bathroom, to the toilet on time. And so I wouldn't want my mother to have to walk through any soiled areas. How often are they going to shower my mom? And are they really going to? They might have a binder and someone makes check marks, but how do I really know? I mean, the way I knew that my mom was showered or not is I just looked at her and I looked at her hair. Was her hair greasy? And sometimes I'd look around her face and her neck. And, if you lift up her dress around her waist, I mean, I could see that. And so I would definitely ask questions on how often they get bathed, and look at their feet. Their feet tell a story. Even if they don't wear socks, I could tell that my mom's feet were dirty between the toes, you know. So, and body odor, they start to smell.
Are there any facilities when you were looking at stood out to you in a positive way, and what made them different?
Yes. I think the facilities where you saw where the employees had been there for like 15 years or 19 years, that means a happy employee has happy management and is a happy facility, generally speaking. And also the ones who give their caregivers education. If they get a geriatrician to come in and the geriatrician gives a seminar, to have as many people as possible attend that seminar and teach them techniques how to work with people with dementia. And sometimes, I mean, the second facility my mother was at, I mean, they were burning through caregivers in 2 to 3 months. My mother wasn't getting the consistency that she needed, of having the same caregivers coming, one for the morning shift, one for the afternoon shift, so that she sees familiar faces, because even people with dementia can build a rapport with the same person. Activities. I wanted to see lots of stimulating activities for my mother, and some places offer field trips to museums, to the beach, doctor's appointments, supermarkets, restaurants, and they have certain days that they take your parents. I think it's important that there is a shuttle service that runs 5 days a week, even if it runs 3 days a week, that you can align your doctor's appointments. I usually would go with my mother to all of her doctor's appointments and dental appointments. And oftentimes I would go in the shuttle together with her. And I was very grateful for this service because my mother travels with a wheelchair and she only uses a walker in her room. Hairdresser, hair salon, that's important so that she can get groomed. And oftentimes they will do pedicures and manicures. I think it's also important if a podiatrist, my mother is diabetic, so she needs to have her toenails looked at and trimmed by a podiatrist. The number of staff members. When you walk into a facility, do you see staff members zipping around, accompanying people while they're walking? This third facility I've moved my mom into, I thought I was in a hotel lobby when I walked in there. I mean, there were people crisscrossing, and I walk into the dining area sort of between meals, and there were a minimum of 50 people all in their wheelchairs and in chairs, sitting there doing chair exercises. Also, physical therapy. Got to keep these residents moving. So if they don't want to do the chair exercise, but you want to keep them mobile and keep their mobility going, then it's really nice if there is a physical therapy program that's on the premises, so you don't have to get a private physical therapist to come in 3 days a week.
I've searched and I've visited a lot of facilities, and I hate to say this, but some of them seem like you just go there to die. Just that feeling that you get in it, it's so low energy, and no one is around, and it's just you can tell, you could feel it. And I've been to communities that are really vibrant, and where I would love to move in there. I mean, I visited a few of them. How many have you seen, and really, why did you choose this one? Like, what are, if you're going to go look and you're like, yeah, these are the good ones, what does that look like?
With my dad, he was in a rehab facility, and we had no idea which facility that we wanted to take. So we looked at something that was very, less expensive and smaller, like a very small facility where they had 5 residents there and 1 caregiver. Well, I walked in and the residents were either in bed, or one was parked in front of the television, and one was just sort of sitting in her wheelchair, kind of looking sort of into the air. And the caregiver was just down the hall, not doing anything, and just sitting there, I think, with the cell phone. And there were no activities. No one was wheeled out into the outdoors, into the fresh air. I was shocked because it just looked like a place that you just go to die.
Yeah.
Because there's no one talking to them, no programming, nothing. So I was like, no, we're absolutely not doing that. And then I went to another facility, which was a little bigger. And they had kind of a bunch of wheelchairs parked in front of the TV. And it was kind of dark and dingy, and just there, I saw a few staff members walking around, but they really didn't have too many activities. And I felt like that was definitely not the place either where I want my parent to be. So I had to go to a bigger place, 100 to 150 residents, before I found a place that offered the programs that I was looking for my parents. There are also the type of facilities where you buy in. Instead of paying monthly rent, you pay over $1 million for like a condominium in there, a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. And some people choose to do this buy-in rather than paying the monthly fees. I mean, monthly fees can be $10,000 to $20,000 a month.
Yeah.
So that's financing. That's another story.
Yeah. So let's talk about financing it, because people do not realize how expensive these facilities are, and Medicare only pays for so much of it. What is the reality of that like?
We have not been able to utilize Medicare. It's all been savings. So we had to sell a home. It was an investment property, a rental. We had to sell that home to make sure that we have money to finance this. But when the interest rate is high, if you have money, you can invest that money, and perhaps from the interest or investments, you might be able to float your annual expenses for, if they are, $12,000 a month,
Yeah, and that's not
It's
unheard of.
possible.
I mean, when I look at them, and everyone, we live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so yes, it is expensive here, but it's not. When I talk to other people, other people who help find assisted living for people, the cost is not so far off. So like in the Bay Area, I'm seeing anything from 8 to 15,000 a month. And this is just for the is just for the living, the room or the apartment, the food, the utilities. That doesn't include the actual help, the assisted living that you need. So if you need if you need help bathing, that's an additional fee. If you need an extra day of cleaning, if you need if you need physical therapy, does so I know that Medicare does not help with the living, that 8 to 10,000, that 8 to 12,000 that I just spoke about. Now, your mom and other people, when they go into assisted living, they do get that extra help. Does Medicare help with that at all?
Just with her medications, and with the Medicare will pay for a hospital bed. They will pay for the wheelchair. Um, they don't pay for like the walker, or the commode, her raised toilet seat. Any of the little things they don't. But for the big items, but only if the doctor recommends it.
Okay.
For that type of thing. And you can, I believe it's the care, the cost of care, not the room, but the care is tax deductible.
But that's
Um,
still out of pocket.
yeah, yeah, we've been paying out of pocket. I know that in the San Francisco Bay Area, I mean, for someone to come in for 24 hours a day into your home, it's like it could be $22,000 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people try to do it themselves at home to take care of their parents. And if you have siblings, that's possible, but that's also, it's very stressful on the family to do that.
Yeah. Very, you become a caregiver versus a son or daughter.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very
Yes.
stressful to do that. Looking back on your search, is there anything you would have done differently in the selection process?
I always tried to find a lighter, brighter space for my mother. And in the first facility, she was on the north side, but you can't always choose the side that you want your parent to live in, because if they only have one room available, you might have to take a little darker room. Um, I've always tried to. I wish that she would have had more escorting. I think that was just to get out of her room, and I put her in a 1 bedroom unit because she didn't want to be in a studio, but she never used her living room, so the studio would have been adequate for her. I would have checked out the facility with the Department of Social Services first, had I realized that that was you know that was an option. But I just, when you go on the internet, sometimes it doesn't come up immediately who to look for to check out a facility. But you can look at ratings or Yelp reviews or different types of reviews if you do Google a specific facility, and see what people say about that facility. But even if they say, just look at the negative ones, because those are the ones that you're going to be concerned about, and think carefully about, well, is this concerning what they're saying? I think I would have done more research, but I was in such a hurry to get my mom placed, or, in the first place. And then in the second place, we were also had, we had had several care conferences with the facility, and things were not changing. And they basically told us we need to move our mother if we want to have more care.
Mm.
And the the problem in many facilities is not enough staff. And so I found that in the first facility and in the second facility to be the problem. Care is more important than if it looks luxurious and brand new. Care.
Moving into, or even thinking about moving into an assisted living community is, it is stressful, and it's change, and people don't want to talk about it. And what I always tell people are, do the search way beforehand, even before you're ill or your husband or wife is ill, because these are just options, so that when something does happen, what's out there, and you are, you have the options, you're prepared. Go and have a meal there, go have lunch or dinner at the facility, take a tour, and then when you're ready, at least your options, that you're just not stuck at home. And that also reduces a lot of the fear around moving into one of these communities, because as I said, I looked at some of them and I wanted to move in. So, and also it gets you thinking about how you're going to finance, how you're going to plan. So yeah, I'm not saying as a 30-year-old you're going to do this, but as a 50, 55-year-old, 60-year-old, start taking a look just to see what's out there, and know how much things are going to cost, because it is eye-opening. It is a big surprise.
Yes, yes. No, I agree. And I think touring 3 to 5 facilities is probably gives you a good idea what's there. And I recommend that if you want to see your parents on a regular basis, to go local, not place your parents 2 hours away or 3 hours away, even if it's going to save a little bit of money. And you have to look very carefully on how everything is priced, and look at the grand total. But even after you move in, they're going to ask you, oh, do you want diaper service? So that the diapers, a certain 45 every 2 weeks are delivered, for example. Laundry. The facility that I just moved her into, it's $150 a month for them to do her laundry. But I don't know if, it's usually not an option for you to do your parents' laundry.
Are there any resources that you used besides the social service site? Are there any other resources or support systems that you used
Yes.
that you found helpful?
So the Alzheimer's Association, www.alz.org. And they have support groups for your geographical area. You just have to look. And they have some that are online support groups, and others you can actually physically go somewhere and meet with a support group. Sometimes the senior center has, your local senior center has good resources and a good directory. But I would definitely recommend them for, and also to look up information on all types of dementia. And they have the phone numbers that you can look up online. Just go to their website and you can find all the information that you need. I would say they would be the most comprehensive.
So, Annemarie, thank you for joining us and sharing such a personal journey. Your openness and insights are invaluable, and I'm sure they're going to help many of our listeners find, the right assisted living community for their loved ones. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me on your show. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Folks, today's discussion reminds us of the diverse options we have in honoring and caring for our loved ones, whether it's choosing an assisted living community, exploring home care, or any other avenue. The most important thing is to find a solution that aligns with their needs and your capacity to support them. Remember, it's not just about finding a safe place, but a place where your loved ones can continue to thrive with dignity, joy, and comfort. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or would like to share your experience, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort on your journey. Until next time, take care.